So George likes to tinker with tech, game online, eat good food, drink straight whiskey, and live the good life. He's a consultant at Empired. All right, George, the stage is yours.
It says I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, you are. So if you just click play, that'll probably work.
There's I use Teams, I'm sorry. Stop share, no.
No.
Share.
So on the Keynote window, you can probably just click play.
That play. Okay.
And then you're all good.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you everyone who's attending. Last I had a look on the YouTube, we were still above 300, which is awesome. I saw Ian on Twitter, which is actually where I met him, talking about B-Sides Perth. And he said, oh, we're going to do this conference. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds awesome. So I just sort of flippantly said, hey, I'd love to talk about it. And he just equally flippantly said yes. And then I was committed to doing a talk. So I had to think of something. And this is it. So we're talking about the Pwnagotchi. So first of all, just to let you know what we're going to talk about, we're going to cover what it is, how do you make one, how do you use it, and a little bit about the technologies and what goes on in the background. So about BetterCap, a little bit about WPA handshakes, what AI it uses, and if it's really a hacking tool, and then we'll cover off there. So before we start, just a little bit about me. These are the things that consume most of my time. I'm a dad and I'm a husband. I am a gourmand. I'm a tech and internet geek. I finally accept it as I nearly hit 40. I'm almost a champion in Rocket League. I did hit it last season, but slipped back down to Diamond 3. And my day job is a consultant at Empired, and I also volunteer with the Australian Computer Society as one of the directors. So everything I say is all me and not my day job or my volunteering. So yeah. So what is a Pwnagotchi? It's an open source project by a guy known as Evil Socket. He also makes BetterCap. So the Pwnagotchi is a A2C based AI, which is powered by BetterCap, and it's running on the Raspberry Pi Zero W platform, at least in my instance. Oh, my stars. You can kind of see him. This is Bobo. He's my little Pwnagotchi. So the more you use your little digital pet, the better it gets, because it learns through how it succeeds in capturing your WPA frames. It basically, does its own thing so long as it's powered on, and with you, it'll associate to access points or maybe send a disassociation frame out and then watch the handshake. And yeah, it's pretty self-sufficient. So it runs on a platform called the Raspberry Pi Zero W, at least in this instance. So it's good to use this platform. It's a little microcomputer. I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining about it just so you can understand why this platform's useful. It's got a 40-pin GPIO header, which will give you the opportunity to interface with the device. And it's used in this instance for the e-ink display. It's got a 1 gig CPU, half a gig of RAM. It's got 802.11n Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 4.1. It can output to a screen using mini HDMI. It's got 2 micro USB ports, and one of these USB ports can be used for data. So when you plug it into a computer, it also can be set up as a USB gadget. And one of the gadgets that it can be set up as is an RNDIS network adapter or Ethernet adapter. So you can actually plug these little devices in and use them to be powered and get a network connection. And if you're running a Linux OS on it, SSH in and control it. So you'll see that there's also a camera connector, so you could plug a camera into these things if you want. There's no built-in storage, but it has got a micro SD card reader. These are really good platforms to tinker with because they only cost around $20 at the moment. They go up and down with the exchange rate. When I was buying them in September last year, I think I was paying about 16 bucks, so it's not too bad still. They were recently out of stock globally, but I managed to purchase a new one just last week. So if you are interested, they'll be available. I am actually going to send out a flurry of tweets, and I've put the ComfyCon AU handle in it, so you'll be able to get links to everything that I'm talking about. To do this project, you can get, where is it? You need to be able to connect the screen. So if you have a look, you can see it. I have pins on mine. It's hard, and I've also got a USB connector on it. But those pins don't come by default. You can see on the diagram on the screen, it's just got the empty holes that you could solder pins in. Pwnagotchi, which is a UK company, actually has a solderless method of attaching pins where you get a little rig and you hammer it. Less traumatic than it feels, and it works very effectively. And lastly, you really want to get a good USB cable. Don't get a cheap one, because a lot of the time they only do power. And I've thought that, I've doubted my tech abilities many times when I was starting out with these Pi Zeros, because it would power up, you'd see all the lights and you couldn't connect to it. And that's because it didn't have the required cables to send data. So make sure you get that. All right. The other component that you probably want to get to do this is an e-ink display. WaveShare makes one. This is the one recommended by the developer. It's what they use, and if you buy one of these, it'll be a pretty good chance it'll work. You can get them for also around $20, and I'll send a link. There are other ones. This is the version 2 of the 2.13-inch display, but you can also get the version 1, which should work. You can get a 2.7-inch, which is bigger. This one fits really nicely on the top of, is the same size as the Pi Zero. And there's others. Pwnagotchi makes an inky hat, but that's around 50 bucks. So probably isn't useful. You don't want to use an OLED or an LCD display because they'll use too much power. I was trying to find the value from the tech sheet on how much power it uses, but basically this isn't powered at the moment and you've still got a display, so it uses 0, and it uses a very, very small amount just when it refreshes. All right, so to get started, you've got 2 options. You can go to the Pwnagotchi.ai website and download the pre-built image. This is very, very easy, and it's something which I defaulted to after trying the second option, which is to download the Raspbian image from the Raspberry Pi website, plus then install the Nextmon patches, which gives your monitoring mode for your Wi-Fi. You can't use the Kali image, which I thought would have been pretty straightforward because, and this is from the website, not my knowledge, the Kali image doesn't do floating point correctly, which is required for TensorFlow, which is used for AI, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So if you do want to build it yourself, you'd need to download Raspbian, get the Nextmon on it. You'd need to install the screen drivers. You'd need to install and configure BetterCap, install and configure Pwngrid, which we'll talk about, install Python 3, which I think's on Raspbian anyway, and then install the Pwnagotchi code base, and then hope it runs. And my biggest problem was I didn't have the time to tinker properly because I just wanted to play with it. And the second one was I couldn't get BetterCap running properly. So I was initially like, I don't want to use the image because I don't know what they've put into the image. But I soon got past that level of paranoia because it wasn't working. So if you do download the image, which I strongly recommend, I encourage you to use Berliner Etcher to write that image. It's just because it's so easy. It just works really well. It's an open source project. You write it straight to your micro SD card, and then you put it into your Raspberry Pi Zero, and you boot it up by powering it, and that's it. Other options are you can use Win32 Imager. If you're on just a Linux command line, you could use DD if you can remember the syntax. I put this slide in so I could have a breath. But I did steal a quote from the website because I thought it was pretty cool, and it explained why the developer did develop it. So you know about
Hey, George, if you can hear us, your audio has just died. Maybe. Yeah, so if you guys can still hear me, we'll try and get George. I'll try and send him a message now and try and get him back talking. George, can you hear us? We can't hear you. I am not sure what's going on. He is not muted.
Hey.
There we go.
Oh, man.
What happened?
I'm using a wireless headset, but it said it's charged.
Did you turn on the Pwnagotchi? Ah.
Green is charged.
Did
how
the
many slides?
Probably one back. Go back one. Yeah, I think this is probably where it died.
Well, fortunately, I just elaborated a little bit as to what's on the slide. So if I don't repeat it, it's probably not that big a deal.
Okay. All
right. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, mate.
And Brendan, thank you for sending me the WhatsApp. Brendan's got my back. Okay. So I was just going to explain a little bit about the four-way handshake because it's kind of what the Pwnagotchi attacks, or rather, you know, to put it back into more friendly terms, because it's a digital pet, it's what it eats, right? So Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. You go for a walk around your neighborhood, every house is probably going to be broadcasting at least one Wi-Fi network. The standard, you know, security of choice is probably WPA2 with a pre-shared key. There's not really many WPA3 access points. And inherently, it's flawed in its security. So the developer of this project, Evil Socket, he said that he's created this just to point out how insecure it is. So I mentioned earlier, though you may not have heard because I was probably talking to myself, that the device will go around and capture a PMK ID from message 1, which is on the slide, message 1, the EA-POL key. That's from the actual access point broadcasting to would-be clients. And there's a part of the frame which actually contains what's called the PMK ID, which contains, and you can see down the bottom, the PMK ID has your a SHA hash of the PMK, a PMK name, the MAC access point, and the MAC station, the MAC address for the two. And since these things are known, they can be reversed, and using Hashcat, you can actually crack them. But the little device itself doesn't. The little device just captures the handshake because that's what it eats, and that's what makes it happy. Alternatively, it can capture the whole handshake when it sees a client associate with the wireless access point. So it gets all 4 of the messages, and then that can also be taken away. And you know, when it gets eaten, it's handily stored in a PCAP file, which is a very portable format, which can be converted later. So if you are taking your little Pwnagotchi for a walk, take it easy, because sometimes it needs to actually spend a little bit of time. Part of the learning is failing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So just say you go for a walk and you take your time, and your little Pwnagotchi, you know, feeds and is stuffed full. Maybe you want to sort of see how it goes, and while you can tell by the screen, you can also connect to it, and you can copy the captured PCAP files off it, and you know, do things with it. So there's 2 ports on the 2 ports. You'll see one's just for power and one's just for data. I mentioned before, you can power it just on the data port, but if you plug it into the data port and then plug the other end of that USB cable into your computer, it will enable the USB gadget mode. The device itself is really smart. Depending on which port you plug it into will depend on which port it depending on which mode it will boot in. So if you boot it into the data port, it will boot into the manual mode, which allows you to communicate with it via the Ethernet connection. If you plug it into the power, it leaves it in auto mode, which is essentially the AI mode, where the Python script in the background will orchestrate the BetaCap activities, you know, to you know, look for networks and do its thing. The Python code base is where the AI is built in. So, you know, if you want to control BetaCap manually, you need to have it in manual mode. And if you want it automatic, you want it in auto mode. So I took this screenshot to show, and to be honest, I haven't configured PwnGrid on mine because I didn't really need to share it with other people. I did the project just for my own fun, but I took this screenshot just a couple of days ago, and there's about 6,000 in the wild, and there's just under 200 from Australia. So basically, you know, there's a few people who have set this up. You get to this map on the Pwnagotchi website, and it's just the Pwn map. And there's a leaderboard, and you know, like that, it has been gamified a little bit, so it's quite cool. And if you do, it'll only log in and send data to the Pwnmat if you configure it to do so once you are when you're setting it up, and also it has to be connected to the internet. Now it won't connect to the internet over Wi-Fi because the Wi-Fi stays pretty much permanently in monitor mode. So when you plug it into your computer through the manual mode, you'll need to set up like an internet connection sharing. Or something like that, which is pretty straightforward in Windows, or actually in any desktop OS is pretty straightforward. All right. So I haven't really spoke much about the AI or about, you know, the Pwnagotchi. I've talked about the technology and the hardware, but let's talk about my mate Bobo. And I was actually really reluctant to show you it running because normally down the bottom, you can't see it, stupid stars, down the bottom there, it tells you the last access point that it captured a frame for, and it's usually my home Wi-Fi. And my home Wi-Fi is not on Wiggle, and I'm kind of keen to keep it that way. But if it were, I don't want people to know where I live. So when Pwnagotchi is running, he's got these different faces. All right, so normally it'll be just in the observing or the neutral or even the happy, but you know it will actually go through and change based on you know, like a direct reflection of its activity, which is being driven by the orchestration. The face will change, and it's unbelievable how much character the face gives this little e-ink display slash pet. Like you really feel like it's its own personality. It's wonderful. And you know the guy who wrote the project, he's also written into it so that when two Pwnagotchis come close to each other, they actually recognize that there's another of its kind, and they start working together after a while if they're friends and have connected to each other, but they get excited when they see each other. And if you just leave it sitting there like I often do, and no new Wi-Fi comes along, it starts to get sad and bored and demotivated. So, you know, it does encourage you to actually want to take it out or turn it off, depending how heartless you are. But it is it's really cool how much life it has. So the AI algorithm that the Pwnagotchi uses to actually drive its action is called the advantage actor critic. All right. Now, I'm not a data scientist, and I have read through the explanation a few times, but I apologize if I completely misunderstand this and you're offended because you are a data scientist. But the gist of it is this algorithm will have an entity basically go through the environment trying things, and it's incentivized with a reward. So in this instance, the Pwnagotchi's reward is that it will be capturing Wi-Fi. And it goes over and over, and that's what the actor does. The advantage part of it is trying to gain an advantage and do it better. And the critic part of it is a reflexive part of it. So we all learn better when we sit back and ask ourselves, how did we go? And how can we improve? And that's what the critic does. So it actually goes through and iterates. But more than that, you know, the A2C algorithm can make assumptions, and then it tests the assumption through action, and then it reflects on the assumption through criticism. And that's how it will get better. Occasionally, it will actually choose something that it thinks is wrong just to validate its decisions. And even when faced with only bad decisions based on its assumption, it can still make the best of it. So it's quite a good machine learning algorithm. So I mentioned earlier, it uses the TensorFlow, which is an end-to-end open source platform for machine learning. I did read once in a sci-fi novel that if there's any science that's sufficiently advanced, it will appear like magic to the ignorant. And the AI part of the Pwnagotchi is like magic to me, but it works. And my pet Bobo absolutely feels like it has its own personality. So lastly, I guess it's like a rhetorical question, but is this a hacking tool? And my response to this is it's no more a hacking tool than a USB thumb drive or a paperclip is. It depends on your intention and your skill level. So if you know what you're doing, the things that this Pwnagotchi does is really trivial, but very boring and nowhere near as cute. If you want to compromise a wireless network, there's many automated scripts that run start to finish. And so long as you have the right hardware, it's very trivial, but none of them are anywhere near as cute as Bobo. So I'd encourage you to get your own hardware and investigate it for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I know there's a lot of people really interested in the comments about this, and I think it's quite ironic the fact you say that if you don't take the Pwnagotchi out and you don't take it places, that it gets very sad. I think that's a bit of a metaphor for all of us right now.
Yes. Yep. No, yeah. It's yeah. I am going to be sending out tweets as soon as I jump out of this this session. So if you want the links to stuff, jump on Twitter and you'll see them appear shortly.
Fantastic. And we'll retweet those as well. But remember, all the Twitter handles for all the speakers are on the speakers page. So you can go find any of our speakers there. But again, thank you very much, George, for your talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much.